It's really awesome to have Ari help us close out this session. A little bit of history. When Kathy and I were thinking about starting Argus, we were inspired by Ari when he speaks. He makes you think about what might be possible. Could you have a great place to work, a great culture? Could you build that in a company? And as we were thinking about Argus, we thought that would be a cool thing to do. And as we got closer to our decision date, we talk about having 100 conversations, and you talk to everybody you can about this model, and you find people who love it, you find skeptics, and we organized some time on Ari's schedule and met and took him through this concept of an everyday farmers market that we would be running. And he looked at us and realized that neither of us had really done something like that before, and his comment was that there's a big difference between wanting to be in retail and actually being in retail. And he offered us jobs at Zingermans to spend a year to get up that learning curve. And we appreciate the directness. It's been this kind of conversation the whole way. And then I'd say kind of more importantly for all of us is so everything we've been learning and talking about the last day and a half are the technical, the funding, the importance, the need, all of these to build an organizations that can help improve local food sales. And none of it works unless you have the culture piece. If you have a functional culture in your company and also a functional customer service component. And so this is the part where Zingermans has been so generous, and Ari in particular, with sharing wisdom on these aspects. So we've incorporated across the board at Argus, the 10-4 customer service, all of the aspects that we see, the code reds, the code greens, embracing a complaining customer as a cherished thing. All kind of comes from the training that we've worked with Zingermans and ZingTrain in particular, as well as our staff huddles, that we don't go home at the end of the day without a huddle where you can leave what you like best and want to do better next time at work. It's just these simple things that make it big and better. So I think it's the important leg of the stool, and I'm going to turn it over to Ari to carry on from here.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Good morning. I talk with my hands and I need to read from books, so holding microphones doesn't work. And we failed to discuss clip-on microphones, so I'm just going to go natural and talk out loud. Thank you. So one of the things I'll say about Bill and Kathy, so a lot of people come to talk to us about their ideas of what they think they're going to do. But it's a very small number that actually does it, and they did it. And I just have enormous appreciation for what they made happen. The ideas, people are always asking me about ideas, but I'll tell you right now, ideas are fast, easy to come by. I'll give you 40 right in the next 5 minutes. It's the hard part is doing it, and they did it. So. Appropriately humble, but before I start, my email is ari@zingermans.com. Where's my recorder that said I would never answer email? There you are. I actually will answer your email. If I miss one, try to have positive beliefs. It's just that I missed one. Don't generalize. It's just a mistake. But today is really meant as the beginning, or last night if you were there, it's meant as the beginning of a conversation, not the end. Whenever we met a decade or 12, 15 years ago, I don't know, I probably waited on you unwittingly for decades before that, but this is really meant as a beginning of a long-term relationship. And in the story that Bill just shared, we are all in this together. And none of us can do it alone, and so whatever I can share with you today is really the product of thousands and thousands of other people, some I've never met, some I don't even know help me to learn what I've learned, and all of what we've done as an organization is not mine, it's a product of all the partners, my business partner from day one, Paul Saginaw, but thousands and thousands of people and all the people who grow the food, make the food, ship the food, the truck drivers who get us the food, the customers who buy the food, etc. So thank you for the chance to do this. It sounds like it's going great. Yeah, so I'm going to try really hard not to blow it. I don't want to be like the relief pitcher that comes in and then blows the 9-run lead. Okay. So James Baldwin said, "The world changes according to the way people see it. And if you can alter even by a millimeter the way people look at reality, then you can change the world." So my hope in the next 45 minutes is just to maybe give you a lens. In this audience, everybody's pretty much already aligned with what I'm going to say. When I speak at business conferences, that's not always the case. Here I think we're, by definition, pretty ethically aligned on most things. But still, sometimes better lenses can allow, or more effective lenses can allow us to see what we've been struggling with in new ways that help us to make the change. And I think that Baldwin's insight is, oh, look at that, dude. That's a fucking miracle. Let's see what else. I asked for world peace. He said, what can I do? I was like, how about world peace? Maybe that's going to help I need too. Start small with the clip-on mic. So there's no PowerPoint. I know in some ways it's ecologically less sound, but the reality is, my experience, if you take notes, you'll remember more, and you'll take it with you. If you just look at pictures, nothing, I like pictures, but my intent is to follow along with this. How many people were there last night? Okay, so I'm not going to repeat our entire story in depth, but for those who weren't there, let me just give you a little history. There's a little Candyland version of our history, if you like pictures, on page 2 in your Zing Train workbook. So I'm very quickly, I'm from Chicago. I came here to U of M to go to school. I studied Russian history. How many history majors here? Yeah, wait, when I go to business conferences, there's like one in the back corner. Okay, I spoke at accounting thing once. There wasn't a single history major in the room. I also studied anarchism quite a bit, and I've come back to study it even more in depth in the last 10 or 12 years. And I write a lot about the application of anarchism to modern organizations, so that's a whole nother topic that we're not going to dwell on today. But anyway, after graduating with my history degree, as some of you who have them know, there's nothing you can actually do with a history degree. You know a lot, but you can't do anything with it that earns you an income other than go back, get more degrees in the hopes that later you could get something that earns you the income. I didn't know what I was going to do next. My mother was insistent I would go to law school. I had already failed to go to medical school because I fell asleep in chemistry class every morning for the first week and dropped the class, and that was the end of pre-med. So I'd driven a taxi while I was in school part-time, which was totally fine but unremarkable, picking people up at the bar at 2 o'clock in the morning and having them tell you really bad jokes when they're really drunk is not that inspiring. If anybody drives Uber or Lyft in their spare time, you've probably experienced it. So one of my college roommates was waiting tables at a restaurant in downtown Ann Arbor called Maud's, and I went in there looking for the same job he had. I applied 3 different times trying to get in. I had never worked in restaurants. They finally offered me a job washing dishes, not knowing that you weren't really supposed to want to wash dishes. I just said sure, and they said, could you start tomorrow? And that's the story. The inaccurate story of Zingermans that is told around the business school by people who don't really know us is that my business partner, Paul Sag, and I went to college together and dreamed this up in our dorm room. But that's totally not true. We both went to U of M, but he's 5 years older than me. We did not know each other in college. When I was in college, I read a lot of Emma Goldman and I got high a lot, but I did not have any dreams of opening a business nor any interest in food. I just got lucky. I stumbled into work that I really love. I still go home and cook every night. So those of you who were there last night, I went home and made sardines and eggs, which I'm going to write about this week in the e-news, for dinner, which was great. So I love the food. I love the cooking. Like you, I'm inspired by what we can do through food. And then I also lucked out because I met my business partner, Paul Saginaw, whose first day as general manager was my first day as dishwasher. Which probably tells you something in hindsight, although I wasn't cognizant of it at the time, about the non-hierarchical belief system that underlies our organization, because in most restaurants, general managers and dishwashers do not connect. They might say hi to each other. So that's how we got going. I started prepping, line cooking, managing kitchens, worked there for about 4 years. Paul left, those who are local, halfway through that, opened Monahan's Seafood Market with Mike Monahan. He and I stayed friends. Fall of 1981, November 1st. I gave 2 months notice. I know it was November 1st because I didn't want to do New Year's Eve inventory, which most industries don't understand, but if you work with food, it's the worst inventory of the year. Nobody wants to do it, and it's a pain in the butt. And I was like, okay, I'll be done before that happens. In one of those wonderful coincidences of life, Paul called me like 2 days later, and he said, hey, this little building near the fish market's coming open. We went down to the deli building, we looked at it, and somehow within like a week, we decided we were gonna open. We had far less knowledge than you do after this conference. But somehow we got going. We opened on March 15th, 1982, which in the spirit of Russian history, I forgot this up until I was doing the Emma Goldman pamphlet 4 or 5 years ago, but it was the day in 1917 that the Tsar abdicated. I was hopeful last year it would repeat, but it didn't. We opened in a space smaller than this room by far, 1,300 square feet. There's like 5 times more of you than would have fit into the building. Traditional Jewish food. I'm sorry? Cafe Creole? No, Paul had managed Cafe Creole before that. What building? The deli, the same one we're in now. Oh, gotcha. Remember that? He moved up north a while ago, so it's all getting blurry. There you go. So anyway, we opened up on March 15th, 1982, 2 employees, me and Paul, a little bit of what's now called specialty food, as I said last night. At the time was mostly just called weird. Nobody knew what extra virgin olive oil, goat cheese, or varietal honey was. It was not like people were looking for it, nor were they looking for better sandwiches. The general wisdom when we opened, to be honest, was that we would be out of business within 18 months. Ann Arbor had 10, 12 delis close in the previous decade. People told us it was a bad location because we weren't downtown. As you will have experienced if you've been there, there's still no parking to this day, and some of you in the room can remember when not everybody had a map in their pocket and people used to get completely confused by the one-way streets. It was quite common to get, this is when phones were attached to walls, they would call and they're like, okay, I'm like, I know I'm close, but I've been driving around for 45 minutes. We'd have to talk them in like an airplane without the autopilot for the landing. 5 years later, we were considered geniuses. Turned out Ann Arbor always needed a deli, and it was a really fabulous location. This pattern has been repeated over and over again. Most of you in this room can relate. I'd imagine you could relate. In another 5 years, farm stops will be like, I'm glad Debbie Stabenow was here. Every politician in the country will know that farm stops are the answer. There's a quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Anybody read his science fiction? He was from then Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said sorry, I can get you the exact quote. He said, all revolutionary ideas go through 3 stages. Stage 1, it's completely impossible, it'll never work. Stage 2, it might be possible, but it's not really very practical. And then my favorite, stage 3, I was behind it from the beginning. This is what we have experienced over and over again. It's true in social change. It's true in medical development. It's true in the work that you all are doing. So I've kind of come to accept that when most people tell me it's a bad idea is usually when we're onto something. That doesn't mean everyone. There's a great book called Ignore Everybody by Hugh MacLeod, M-A-C-L-E-O-D. It's not everyone, literally, but it's most of the public at large will tell you it's a bad idea. Later, they will have all been your best friend. It's remarkable how many fucking people were in that building the first day we opened. Because they couldn't have all fit. I'm just remembering a story. I was pouring water at the Roadhouse one night, it's about 10 years ago. Busy Saturday night like last night for those of you who were there. Nice, large group of family, whatever, at a table, and they're talking, and I don't know, I was pouring water, and the husband goes to the wife, I was just telling my wife, like, how I used to come to the deli in the late 70s, and I loved it, and da-da-da-da, and anyway, I didn't want to say anything and embarrass him in front of his family, so I just kept going, and then I came back around, and then it happened again, and then the third time I came back around, his wife goes, "Didn't you open in 1982? I was like, yeah. I didn't want to burst his bubble, but it was like, anyways, that's how we got going, and I just admire and appreciate the work that you all are doing, because you're pushing through the dissonance, pushing through the naysaying, and pushing through the disbelief that inevitably will surround you as you try to do something special and different. But that's how it works. Thank you. Any big Zingermans questions before I get going? On page 2, you can sort of see a little, like I said, Candyland version of our history. At the top is a little synopsis. I think the total staff is actually low. I'm not sure where we got that number. It's about 750. I added last night, we have about 275 staff members own a share, and we just rolled out a perpetual purpose trust last year, which is a whole nother conversation, but essentially is the idea of creating an old growth forest instead of clear cutting so the business can't be sold, but that's another talk. Sir, questions, anybody? None?
On the Candyland chart, did you ever land on the cupcake and have to go back to the beginning? I have a 9-year-old.
He used to work for us. Back in the day. I loved Candyland. It's actually, I've never played a video game, but I did play Candyland. Any other questions? You're good? Okay. Oh, sir.
What was your process for deciding what comes next?
Yeah, the question is, what's the process for deciding what comes next? So the business school story is that Paul and I are these brilliant heroes, and we decide what to do, and then everybody does it. The actual story is not like that at all. What we do is driven by the prospective partner and their passion and vision. So like I said, ideas are cheap and easy. What's hard is doing the work. Getting, like I referenced last night, doing a startup is really hard. However, the real work, in my opinion, my belief, is 10, 20 years later, who's still in there driving for greatness. Because in the context of the sustainability and the regenerative work that everybody in this room is already committed to, like whatever, you can do anything tomorrow. The question is 50 years from now, what's happening? 20 years from now, what's happening? So what we realized is we were going to go a lot farther when there was somebody who had a passion for what that business did. So Ji-Hae Kim is from Korea. She moved here. She has a deep passion for Korean history and culture. She studies cookbooks from 300-400 years ago to find recipes. Maggie Bayless from Zing Train, who was a server in the restaurant, but later was a German lit major from Oberlin. Where's the person from Cleveland? She went back to Michigan and got her MBA, but later fell in love with training. So that's really her passion. So the idea was to have somebody in there that was driving for greatness, as Paul says, long after the initial glamour is gone. So we have a long sort of process that gets longer every time something goes wrong, then we try to fix it, but good question. Okay, let's look at page 3. Or I'm going to look at page 3. You can look at whatever you want. So this is a metaphor that in this room is probably going to resonate pretty quickly, I hope. At business conferences, it's a little more oddball, but on we go. So one of the good things that has happened from, in quotes, our success, because I don't particularly feel like a success, I just feel like you do, somebody who gets up in the morning and tries to do a little better and recover from what I did wrong yesterday. But anyway, the world at large looks at us in quotes as a success. One of the good problems that's come from that is that people come to us regularly and they all want to know the secret. This manifests in different ways. Sometimes It's a reporter who calls and they're like, or emails or whatever now, that they're like, I'd have 500 words to sum up what makes Zingermans work. What should I say? Or we get a lot of emails, calls, texts, or whatever. I'm going to be passing through town with my significant other. It's often tied to a college visit for the kid. My significant other and I are thinking of opening up our own place next year. Do you just have like 5-10 minutes to sit with us and tell us the key nugget that we need to know? Or there's the business school people that use us as an example to fit their pre-existing theory, so they figured out why we're successful. As you could tell from my tone of voice, they were all making me crazy. One of the best things, though, Paul, my partner, has taught me is when furious, a little saying that says, when furious, get curious. It's super helpful. It's taught me when I'm getting frustrated with others to reflect in, not to blame. So I was like, okay, why is this pissing me off? And of course I arrived, as you already probably did more quickly than I did, at the conclusion that they're good people, they mean well, but we're not doing a good job of framing things in a way that will make sense to them, that will convey the real messages that I think need to be conveyed. So I tried to think of how I could explain it to them in a way that wasn't demeaning or derisive, but would get the message across. And I started to think about what you all think about every day, but most people in the US don't, certainly not 20 years ago, and even now most don't, which is agriculture. I started to think about the environment. At the time that this was going on, I was working on the first book. Your copy would look better than mine. This one's been to Ethiopia and Ireland and all over the place. But I was working on an essay called 12 Natural Laws of Business, which is the subject of this morning's talk. The idea of it came from Paul. The idea of it is essentially, you have the list in the workbook. I'm going to talk about them a little bit. But the idea is basically that all healthy organizations, it's true for nonprofits and for-profits, it's true of large and small, it's true all over the world. All healthy organizations are living in harmony with the natural laws of business. They're like gravity. You don't have to know they're the natural laws. You don't have to use the same language that I've used here. You don't even have to understand why they work. Just like as a history major, to be completely honest, I don't really understand why gravity works. I don't. But I do know very well which way this book will go if I let go, and I make my decisions accordingly. So I was working on this essay on the natural laws of business. When the book came out, I got asked to speak at the Inc. magazine conference in Washington, D.C. That year, and so I went to speak, and when I speak at conferences, generally where I can, I like to pull threads from the previous speakers' talks, although I don't know anything about grant writing, so I can't really. That's where I was for the breakout. But anyway, the speaker before me was Gary Hirschberg from Stonyfield Yogurt. I don't know if anybody remembers him. Anyway, I hate PowerPoint, but he clearly loved it because he had like 300 slides with arrows and colors and all kind of cool stuff going all over the place. But it was actually a very good talk, and he talked in a way that will resonate in this room a lot about how they were improving systemically to reduce their carbon footprint. Awesome. So I'm getting ready to talk after him about natural laws of business, and I'm reflecting on what he's saying, and it dawns on me that he's talking about how human beings are creating an energy crisis on the planet by depleting natural resources. And all of a sudden it strikes me that human beings are also creating an energy crisis in the workplace because they're violating the natural laws of business. Okay, is Caitlin here? No. Caitlin there you are. Hi. So Caitlin, what I want to, thank you, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. What I want to, she was very, it wasn't a, so what I want to suggest is that the corporate world, stereotyping, is the agricultural equivalent of monocropping. From the outside looking in, to the casual observer, I'm a city kid from Chicago who, with all due respect, and I live with a farmer, is still comfortable sitting in the corner of a hot parking lot on asphalt, because that's how I grew up. And the only farm we saw was the one at the Museum of Science and Industry. It's just the truth. I had no idea, man. If we drove through Iowa, it's like fucking awesome. Like, look at all that corn. So the corporate world looks neat. It looks impressive. They got org charts. They got all kind of stuff. But like monocropping, it's unnatural and it's unhealthy. And I don't need to tell you in this room what happens when you monocrop to the soil. I got a whole nother talk on a metaphor for organizational ecosystems that's coming out next year in another pamphlet. The soil in that metaphor is akin to the culture. It creates erosion, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so the kind of farming that you all either do or admire or aspire to do is the opposite of monocropping. By corporate standards, it doesn't look pretty. The family farm circa 1900, and I didn't live on one, and I know enough to know that all farming is difficult, so I'm not here to tell you it was glamorous in 1900. But in a lot of ways, that old family farming worked in a way that was infinitely more sustainable. By modern standards, we all know it looks like a mess. Dude, like they were growing all kind of different stuff mixed up together. The animals were running around in the plants. They didn't go home at 5 o'clock. The work week didn't end at 5 on Friday. But there was a sustainability, regenerative nature to, I believe, to the livelihood that gets lost in the madness of monocropping that people keep pushing for. Is this making any sense? I want to suggest that our organization is a lot like that old family farm circa 1900. Like, you really can't tell from the outside who's in charge. One time I was pouring water at the Roadhouse. There was some restaurant group that was opening like in Novi, which if you're not from here is like 25 minutes from here. And I kind of vaguely knew the guy who was like the national opening manager. So he emailed me and he's like, I want to bring the opening team down to the Roadhouse for dinner. I'm like, yeah, great, awesome, we'll make the reservation. He was, wherever y'all were in there, he was sitting at that, they were sitting at that first table. Where's Haley? I think you were sitting at that table. Okay. There you are. So anyway, I'm pouring water. I talk to the guy. I come back around. I talk to the guy. They're having a nice dinner. Anyway, on the way out, he goes, I got to tell you, man, one of the assistant kitchen managers, he grabs me on the way out. He goes, what's the deal with you and that busboy? I like that. They don't need to know who I am. The point is that in the old farming model, it looks messy, but it actually works. Okay, and that's what I want to suggest is true for healthy organizations. So in the middle of page 3, there's some numbers. These are from a Harris Interactive poll of the American workforce from a bunch of years ago, but there's been a million other polls that say the same thing. Ready? Here you go. Of the American workers surveyed, only 37% knew their organization's goals. Then it gets worse. Only 20% were enthusiastic about the goals. Only 20% saw how they could support achieving the goals. Only 15% felt like they were authorized to work towards the goals. And only 20% fully trusted the organization they work for. How's that sound? Not very good. Dean Tucker is a former Boeing engineer, now writes about business and lives in Houston. I give him credit for this, although later I found out he learned it from somebody else, but I learned it from him, so I still give him credit. He said, just to show you how bad those numbers are, let me tell you what it would mean if you were to translate those statistics onto a football team. Of the 11 players who go out on the field, only 4 of them would know what goal they're going towards. Even more depressing, only 2 of them would care. When they break the huddle, only 2 of the 11 would know what position they're supposed to line up in. Only 2 of the 11 would feel like their efforts on the field made any difference as to whether the team won or lost. And all but 2 were equally likely to root for the other team as for their own team. And I laughed really loud too, but then I realized this is horrible. Because we're not perfect, and I wish we paid triple what we pay people. But we're not paying people triple what they're paying down the block. But the energy of the people in our organization, imperfect though it always is, I hope and believe is much higher than the energy of the people down the block working at Rite Aid or whatever. It's not that there's something wrong with the people at Rite Aid, and with all due respect to our hiring process, it's not the hiring process. It's what happens if you plant a plant in dead, pesticide-laden soil, it will not do well. And that's what happens, okay? So what I want to suggest is that when we violate the natural laws of business, we create this kind of energy crisis. It doesn't need to be that way. We just need to work in harmony with nature. Is this making any sense? Okay. So at the bottom of page 3, it says bad work on the left side. This is a little continuum. So what I want to suggest is when we violate human nature, when we violate the natural laws of business, we create bad work. The technical definition is bad work sucks. We tolerate it. It's given people the belief that work is something you shouldn't have to do. There's a general belief that the only people who work are the ones who have to, and workaholics. Wendell Berry said, paraphrasing, it seems clear that the national ambition in the United States is to attain unemployment because all everybody wants to do is get to 5 o'clock, the weekend, and retirement. But if you're doing bad work, of course, that's what you would aspire to. I'm going to say if you move to the middle of the continuum, you create good jobs. This is what comes up in the news all the time. We're going to have job creation. It's like they tell you we're going to plant another 20 acres of corn, but you don't know how they're planting or what kind of corn they're growing. It might still be better than a subdivision, but it's not necessarily what we want to see happen. Good jobs is what I had when I was running kitchens for the restaurant. The pay was fine, the people were fine, it was pleasant. There was nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't really enough. What I want to suggest is that when we honor nature, when we honor human nature, we can create good work. And I'm pretty confident that that's what everybody in this room, by definition, is already either has or is aspiring to create, and that the more imperfect though we will always be, that we can create that for more and more, hi Tim, more and more people in our organizations, the healthier the soil of the community is going to be. Okay? Here's my take on what good work is. Good work is life-altering, fulfilling, and fun. Good work is about learning, laughing, and growing, all the while earning enough money to make your dreams come true. It's about collaborating with people you care about and who share your values, contributing something positive to the people and the community around you. It's fun, not something you flee from. It's a place you want to be, even if you rightfully have other places you want to go. Good work is about positive energy, both feeling it and building it. Good work is about doing something you believe in, work that you care about in a workplace that cares about you. It's endlessly sustainable, not energy sapping. While people might certainly on any given day go home tired after doing good work, they're rarely spiritually exhausted. When we're doing what we're doing, giving it everything we've got, learning and laughing even under duress, the experience is likely to be energizing, even if in the moment physically tiring. At its upper reaches, good work can be one of the most rewarding things one ever engages in. So I believe anybody can create that, but if we violate nature, we create the equivalent of Monsanto fields that to the uninitiated and the unknowing raised in industrial belief system look good, but are actually the opposite. Is this resonating at all? Questions before I plow ahead, no pun intended. None? Are you okay? Okay, so there's 12 natural laws of business that are on these 2 pages. I did not discover these any more than Columbus discovered America. These are natural laws. They're already true. Like gravity existed before whoever it was, Newton, figured it out. So, why do I believe they're natural laws? Because I've heard these same themes over and over again from every walk of life. I've heard them from athletes. I've heard them from parents. I've heard them from 3rd grade teachers. I've heard them from poets. These are the things that everybody who's getting to greatness, and greatness by your standards, not greatness by socially imposed standards, everybody who's getting to greatness says some version of these things. They might not put it in these words, they don't put them in this order, but they're all doing these things. I've heard it from military people, I've heard it from anarchists. There were anarchist military people too, by the way. There was a Ukrainian anarchist general named Nestor Makhno during the Russian Revolution who almost beat the Bolsheviks. But we don't want to get into Russian history. Makhno. M-A-K-H-N-O. I got a t-shirt from somebody that said, "What would Makhno do?" So there's 12 on here. I don't have time to get into them in depth today, but I do want to talk a little about the visioning because that's the one that I know helped Bill and Kathy, and I'm going to suggest if you only picked one to get going with for your business, this is one that makes sense. So I didn't go to business school. So, I know. So, I'm the poster for liberal arts. They show me off like the one wild animal in the... So, the business school people, when they bring people in, they never say that I didn't go to business school. They just use us as a good business story. But anyway, so the business school version of vision, with all said with respect, is like a little 4 or 5 3-line statement. I never have been able to understand the difference between mission statement and vision statement. I believe in mission statements. We wrote ours. It's like the North Star. It tells you your direction on difficult days when you're feeling lost. Awesome. Vision is very different. Vision is a detailed story of your life, either your personal life, your relationship, in this case, your farm stop or your farm or whatever you're creating. It's the story of your life, but in the future. It's a story. It's not bullet points. It's a story. It's not 3 lines. It includes feelings and facts. They go together. It's not a business plan. It's like the cathedral that you're working to build. You can put in mosque or synagogue or whatever religion you aspire to be part of in terms of place of cathedral. But the point is, it's like that old business fable of the person who goes to Milan. I think it's late 15th century, not Milan if you're from here. Construction of the Duomo. Anybody been to the Duomo? Only 3 of you? Okay. It's quite majestic. So person's walking along, comes to the first person working, says, "What are you doing?" They say, "I'm laying stone." Walks to the next person, "What are you doing?" They say, "I'm building a cathedral." Physically, is there any difference in the work? No, it's the same, man. Mortar, stone, mortar, stone, mortar, stone. Come back the next day, do it again, do it again. I get tired just saying it. Emotionally, what's the difference? Yeah. The vision is the cathedral. Everybody in this room, me included, everybody we know wants to be part of something greater than themselves. The vision helps make that happen. If you started like Richard and Deb did, or Paul and I did, we didn't write down a vision, but it's in your head. It's a natural human process. Anybody have little kids? When you get home, they might have demonstrated for you how this works because they might have turned your living room into a restaurant. I'm fairly confident they didn't pull a permit. I really doubt they engaged in a study of the marketplace or did a SWOT analysis. They just started the fucking restaurant. Every child knows how to do this, but social pressure and school, and I'm all for education, and we live in society, so it is the way it is, but school and social pressure teach us how to not do what we already knew how to do when we were 5. The visioning process that we learned came out of U of M, out of University of Michigan, a guy named Ron Lippitt, late 50s, 60s, and 70s. He taught it to a guy named Stash Kazmierski, who taught it to me and Paul in 1993. So the quick story of how we learned it. So when we opened the deli, we did not write a vision, just like many of you didn't. I wish we would have. We just didn't know you even could write a vision. In our heads, we knew from the beginning we wanted something special. I like unique things. We knew we wanted great food, great service, great place for people to work. We knew from the beginning we wanted to do it in a very down-to-earth setting. So even though the food might be really exceptional, we didn't want it to come across as some haughty, snooty thing that was only for some tiny group of the segment of the population. And we knew from the beginning we only wanted one. No disrespect to those who open multiple units. I like unique things. I like the places that 25 years later, I still remember going there. And as I always say, so my girlfriend grows heirloom tomatoes, peppers. She's about to start her seeds indoors. I'm like, nobody calls her and goes, Tammy, man, we love your stuff. It's so awesome. We're going to raise capital and we're going to open 500 Tam Chop farms all over America. Like, nobody says that. Why? Because it's dumb. It makes no sense. You can't farm like she does in Ann Arbor, or actually Dexter, but you can't farm in Denver the way you farm in Dexter. It's different. We know that, right? So in 1993, fast forwarding, Paul sat me down on the bench in front of the deli. We had expanded the building twice. We were, I don't know, doing $5 million in sales. My mother was still asking me when I was going to go to law school. I'm not exaggerating. We had about, huh?
Boy.
Yeah. That just shows, huh?
When did she stop?
I don't remember exactly what year, but I'm going to say it was about 1995, and she asked me again, and I was like, Mom, we have 100 employees. We've been in the New York Times, Bon Appetit, Gourmet. I didn't swear, but I'm not going to law school. Would you please stop asking me? She goes, I just feel so bad because you're wasting your education. And I was like, that's not a made-up story. So anyway, Paul sat me down on the bench in front of the deli, 1993, one morning about 10 o'clock when I should have been getting the lunch sandwich line ready for the lunch rush, and he looks at me and he goes, okay, in 10 years, what are we doing? It's like, what? It's like, in 10 years, what are we doing? I'm like, Paul, man, I don't know what we're doing in 10 years. He's like, well, I mean, we said we only wanted one place. Like, we turned down offers already from other cities. People are opening on campus because we won't do it. Like, is this crazy? You know, what are we doing? I'm like, dude, I got work to do. And he's like, no, this is our work. In hindsight, I know him well enough to know he probably couldn't sleep for like 4 months worrying about it. In hindsight, what he was asking me is, what's your vision? We didn't have that language yet. I don't think he had one. I know I didn't have one. It's not like we were satisfied because, as per natural law number 8, we've always been about getting better all the time, long before there was a Toyota Way. This is a natural law. But there's a big difference between improving what you have, I've come to understand, and having a vision of the future that's inspiring and energizing, that you believe in. That started a year-long argument, long walks, lots of swearing, frustration with each other, continually coming back to the conversation as we still do to this day till we could figure it out. Excuse me. That ended with the first time we wrote a vision, because during that year we met Stash Kazmierski, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, who had learned from Ron Lippitt how to do this process. They called it preferred futuring. We've adapted it. We call it visioning. We added more of the emotion into the conversation with the facts, so the feelings are woven in there. It's a story. My friend Gareth Higgins, whose book, How Not to Be Afraid, I would highly recommend, who's from Northern Ireland, from Belfast, says, The story that we tell about ourselves and our place in the world is the single most important element in determining our happiness and the kind of life we will lead. The story we tell about ourselves and our place in the world is the single most important element in determining our happiness and the kind of life we will lead. The vision is the story. If you have a story in your head, that's awesome. That's what we had in 1982. We managed to make it. But the reality is, it's more effective if you're documented. We're not, the native people from here are the Ojibwe people, was an oral culture. In an oral culture, people are used to listening in a way that's much deeper than I was raised to do. In our society, writing it down is more powerful. I'm all for pictures on vision boards, but I'm going to tell you what I see as X, you're going to see as Y, and the next person won't even see. So there's a lot to writing it down. I could go on for hours about vision, but the point is it's an inside-out story. It is not an exercise in analysis of the marketplace. Do we have any English majors here? It's free writing. Okay, so you plant your mind in the future, you write your story. Ours is now written for 2032. This is the fourth long-term vision basically that we've had. I'm just going to read you one paragraph, then I'm going to answer questions, and then we'll wrap you up and get you on your way. So there's our vision for 2032, which by the way will put us at 50 years in business, which is like a miracle, is like 10 pages long. It's not a 4-line vision statement. It's a story. Okay, so there's stuff in here about food, there's stuff in here about service, there's stuff here about ecological work, there's stuff about diversity, there's a whole mess of things. The last section is about love, which doesn't show up in a lot of business plans, just saying. ZCOB is Zingermans Community of Businesses. It says every act in the ZCOB is an act of love. Acts to care and connect, to take the implementation of our mission to ever greater heights than ever. We view everyone through the lens of a compassionate heart, choosing patience and positive beliefs. We pause to appreciate the beauty in everyone and everything we work with. We are mindfully conscious of how our decisions impact the people we work with, our customers, and the larger community. We understand that the energy we put into every interaction is essential. We are self-reflective and intentional in our work in this way. Compassion is a deep understanding of the feelings and experiences of others. Working in this way allows us to demonstrate care, and genuine care for others creates real connections. It makes us authentic. These authentic connections create trust, cooperation, and eagerness to work together. We lead with compassion. How does this look if disagreements or frustrations arise? We engage and interact with each other from a place of love, knowing that welcoming discomfort can be key to our growth and better understanding of each other and ourselves. We first assume positive intent in our engagement. We have caring interactions even when we disagree, feeling heard and having courageous conversations without contempt. We choose positive beliefs as we support each other on our paths of growth. We share this journey together. I didn't write that. It's a collaborative work. I'm sure I contributed, but I can't remember who did what. But that's the point. So when you write a vision and you share it, it's inspiring. It helps you keep going when you're tired. It helps attract people who are like-minded, because if you don't have one, they make up their own version. Questions? Yes, sir.
How do you write your vision specific enough to be useful, but also broad enough to be adaptable? Like, if you're writing a 10-year vision, but you're not sure what you know.
Well, it's a long conversation. Here's what I'll say. In your heart, you already know what you want. I'm in recovery from overthinking everything. So don't get me wrong, you can fucking think about it for the next 20 years and you still won't know. But in your heart, you already know. And the hot pen process, we call it, is where you go to Zing Train seminar or whatever, but when you just sit and write nonstop for 45 minutes, it will come out, because I have learned in a good way, my brain, conscious brain, cannot keep up with my hand, and it will say what you really want. If you really care about it, that's what you care about. So, quick story, take a long time to work on these. We started the 2032 vision in 2018. I think roughly a lot of people got involved, as we always do, through our bottom line change process, which is a way of involving as many people in designing the change before you decide, instead of the other way. Anyway, we were all set to roll it out formally in the third week of March 2020. That didn't happen. As we went through the next months of chaos, which you might have blacked out, but most of you can remember if you allow yourself to, I felt like my business life was passing in front of my eyes, and what had seemed reasonably stable, we could have been out of business within another few months. Thanks to the awesome resilience, creativity, hard work of everybody in the organization, and the PPP money from the government, we're still here. Around the end of April, whatever, some of my friends who knew we had been working on this vision, we would call to commiserate, and they'd go like, I guess you're gonna have to rewrite that vision now. And I started freaking out, and I went back, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then I reread the vision. I'm like, there's nothing to change. It's our story for 2032. Like, somebody who did go to med school is gonna figure this out. Not me, but somebody's gonna figure it out. So it's still the same vision. Like, all we did is clean up grammar a little more and rolled it out in January 2021.
I mean, I'm sure it would be great to include all the stakeholders, all the employees, and everybody in the visioning process, but you have such a big team at this point. How do you decide like what stakeholders to include in the visioning process?
Well, we don't include all the stakeholders. We don't include, not out of malice, but we don't go to customers. We don't go to purveyors. It's not that I don't care what they think, but this is our vision. So if the customers come, which many will do at this point, and they love Zingermans, but they really wish we had a cheaper burger, and I've had these conversations, I'm like, dude, I can make you a cheaper burger, but it won't taste like that one. They're like, no, I want this one. I'm like, well, this one's whatever it was at the time, $16, $18. I could give you a $3 burger. They have it down the block. I could give you a $6 burger. I can give you a $9 burger. I can give you a $15 burger. I can give you this burger. But the quality is going to correlate to the price, because I know the public thinks we make up the price randomly to gouge them, but the truth is we do the fucking food cost and then we figure out what to charge. They think it's a black box with brilliant, scheming, evil business people, but in our world, maybe it is like that at General Foods. I don't really know, but it's not like that in ours. So it's about involving organizations. I wrote a lot about it. The bottom line change process, you're getting clear on who's making the decision before you start, so everybody knows. In our organization, it's by consensus of the partners group, which is 22 people consulting with everybody else. Not everybody gets what they want. Hi.
Position taken for an analysis. How ethical is it for institutions or entities within institutions to commodify education without being able to quantify like an output for the people that are consumers of those products? I'm curious to know, just from the perspective of engaging very heavily with technical assistance partners, with our local policy council, and I'm just curious on how to, just in an administrative capacity, to support those endeavors from these institutional partners, and how, I want to hear your thoughts about it. Does that make sense to you, my question?
I understand all the words, and your energy's awesome, but I don't quite understand. So, what's commodify education?
Yeah, I think that these institutions are commodifying education, and there's
like big.
Yeah,
I thought you were talking about Zing Train, and I was trying to understand. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm curious, not necessarily the degree, but technical assistance, and there's resources attached to that that are specific to socially disadvantaged growers. And I want to understand your perspective about how the ethics of that and how to engage with that?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer. I mean, anarchistically, although I grew up with a very positive belief in public education, it is the industrial model I've now come to understand applied to education. I'm not down on public schools, but I don't know the answer. I mean, I could just share, like some people have me come speak, and the Zing Train charges a lot of money, and sometimes I do it for free. It's trying to find the right answer. I mean, some people can't afford a book. I've bought it for them out of my own pocket. I don't know the answer. I mean, I think we're all struggling. But I don't really deal with those much. I don't feel like I'm answering your question, but.
Okay, I'm still working through it myself.
Okay, well, email me and I'll try to do a better job.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not trying, it sounds important and I want to give respect to what you're saying, but I don't know if I really work in that world. Like, we're kind of in our bubble, for better and for worse.
For the purpose of recording, let's try and have questions come through the microphone.
How do you share a 10-page vision with people who are still working against the fundamental rules of business, right? Because
I'm an anarchist.
so for somebody just starting out, how would you approach sharing such a in-depth vision to people who don't think they have time to listen to you? How would you get the word out?
Do you mean your staff?
No, like people you're trying to sell on the idea in the community, farmers, stakeholders.
Oh, I just say if you don't want to read it, don't read it. I mean, what am I going to do? I mean, I'm not judging them as people if they don't want to read it, but honestly, if they don't want to read your vision, do you really want to partner with them? I mean, it's like you're dating somebody and you're like, I've written a 10-page vision for how I believe my life will go, and they're like, I don't have time. Would you keep going? Now, sometimes I live with a farmer. There's farmers who are doing great work but are busy, like of course. So it's finding, I don't know, ride in the car with them and read it to them. I mean, record it for them so they can listen to it while they're, weeding. I mean, it's like there's ways to do it. It's just, I mean, it's not a judgment, but I think ultimately if people aren't interested in what you're doing, like you can't force anybody to change their beliefs. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. Hi. Oh, we were waiting for the mic. You're very good. You're much better behaved than I am. I already forgot.
I wanted to ask you about specifically conflict resolution with partners or other folks in the organization that are part of the decision making, if you've really come into true conflicts, and what are some of the strategies for working through that versus avoiding it altogether?
Well, I grew up with the avoiding. That didn't work very well. Yeah, we have conflict all the time, but we're nonviolent. No, I mean it. Huh?
Life skills training.
I mean, on a formal way, we have a recipe that we teach to everybody. None of us use it perfectly. It's called 4 Steps to Going Direct. Because one thing I learned is if I call Bill and go, man, Kathy did this, and then he goes to Kathy, she's going to go, well, that's not how it happened. And then he's going to come back and he's going to go, well, that's not, and then it goes on and on. It's called manager tennis. You're the ball, and the employees bat you back and forth over the net. So people need to learn to go direct. Now, going direct doesn't include, I'm not talking about if there's sexual harassment or, that's a different thing where people need safety and privacy, et cetera. But I don't like the way you looked at me last week is assuming negative beliefs about somebody who probably could have had their ankle hurt exercising and grimaced at the wrong time and somebody perceived it. So they go direct. Then if they need to go beyond that, they get help from the manager. They put it in writing. CC a leader so that it's documented. Then they get the manager involved or HR involved, and then ultimately it would go to the partners group, which is in a better way than is currently going on in the country, like the Supreme Court, we could say, but it's a bad metaphor right now. So that said, I mean, there's a million skills that I didn't know growing up that we've been trying to learn. Like Paul's way better at it than I am, but learning to listen, learning to choose positive beliefs, learning to practice dialogue versus conversation, learning to repeat back what we've heard, learning to treat everybody with dignity. I mean, I'll be working on them the rest of my life. I mean, there's no you already know most of it, I'm sure, or all of it more than I do, but it's hard. But I guess we just always had this agreement that we would come back to the table till we could figure it out. And we're still trying. I probably should start wrapping up, but I'm not in a rush, but you might be. I don't eat lunch, but most of you do, so you probably want to eat.
For farmers who don't have time to sit down and read very much.
Dude, you've been here for 2 days. What are you talking about?
Now I gotta go back and do like 10 days and 5. But
I've been at work since 6:30 this morning, and I'm going right back to work after this. So
I gotcha. I just wondered if you had any of your philosophies on like MP3 or whatever.
Yeah, the service book, which I don't think is here today, they did an audio book because I did that. That was the last one I did with a big publisher before I didn't like big publishing. In my fantasy, I will record these, but it took 2 days in the studio to do this little tiny service book. So when I look at the 600-page beliefs book, I'm like, this is going to take a fucking month. And when they were like, I was on the 7th take of a sentence, and they're like, more feeling, and I'm like, wow, now I understand what actors do for a living. But yes, I hope to one day do that. But I'm gonna give you my cell phone, and you can just call me. And just for what it's worth, I'm just gonna tell you, like, it's not just farmers. Like, I have friends in business who know about this, who I like, and they're good friends of mine for 20 years, and they're like, they've been working on their vision for 7 years. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're just, I don't have time. I'm like, you spent more time complaining to me that you don't have time than it takes to write it. It's just deciding, you know, Sam Keen, K-E-N, awesome, now in his 90s in Sonoma, and he says, we all have time for what we really want to do. And I don't say that as judgment. It's just like, I don't know. I chose to write instead of watch TV. I chose to read more books instead of going on social media. There's no judgment. Tammy's on Instagram and she uses it amazingly for dog rescue. I just only look at hers and ours and 2 other ones once in a while. But it's no judgment. It's just deciding where we want to be. So on those 2 pages, you have the list of the other natural laws. Email me. There's a lot more in the books. I'm happy to help you. We're all in this together. The better you do, the better the country's going to do, the better the world's going to do. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for all that you have talked about today. I've lived in Ann Arbor and worked in the food industry for like 15 years and like always somehow like danced around Zingermans. So like I've never worked for you and I never worked for Argus. But thinking about people here who have or are going to be opening a farm stop type place, like recognizing that you're opening a 3rd place.
Yeah.
That's really important to the community.
Yeah.
And you're going to attract workers that are really like dedicated to what you're doing. And thinking through your like fundamental rules and how that can guide you. I've worked in a lot of places where I thought I knew the vision and I thought I was empowered to work towards it. And I ended up realizing that the other people that I worked with saw that their job was keeping the owner happy.
Yeah.
And so especially small places that are owner operated, like if you're the owner and you're the boss, like recognizing when that gets complicated. And so being aware, and I think like the fundamental rules of business and thinking through them are really, really important and useful and empowering if you are that owner operator, to building in that like intentionality and space to negotiate that world.
Yeah, thank you very much. The 5th natural law is about servant leadership. So when I go to work, the people like Katie who work in our organization are my customers. It's not a figure of speech. That's really how I look at it. So again, my email is ari@zingermans.com. I do e-news every week, which is where I'm going to work on right after this, because my deadline to hand in tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. is not going to be met if I don't. But please reach out. I think there's a Zing Train discount for them. Okay. We would be glad to help you. We do charge because we're in business too, but we try to do it in a way that helps other people to grow and whatever. I'm going to close with an Emma Goldman quote. So Emma Goldman, for those who don't know who she was, came to the United States in 1885 when she was 16 years old. By the time she was 20 or 21, she was speaking to audiences of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people, which for those days would have been almost all men, almost all wearing hats, by the way, just for you visualize it. And of course, there was no clip-on mics or handheld mics. There were no mics. And she was, I think, 5 feet tall at her tallest. So you can imagine a 5-foot-tall woman speaking and holding the audience of 5,000 men wrapped for an hour, which is awesome. I wish I had been there. She went to jail many times. She was, as you might have already assumed, an anarchist. She went to jail many times for advocating for women's rights, ironically or not ironically, whatever the word is. It's the same arguments that are happening right now, 100 years later. Tragically, I guess would be a better word. Anyway, she was expelled from the U.S. in 1919. They sent her back to Russia because she was from Lithuania, which was part of the Russian Empire. This is right after the revolution, for those of you who aren't Russian history majors and lost track of history. It was theoretically a very inspiring time for people of radical thought, but of course it quickly degenerated from inspiration to terrible. And in 1923, 100 years ago last year, she wrote a book called My Disillusionment with Russia, which could have come out in 2023 with more modern language, and it would have been the same book. Anyway, in 1911, she wrote an essay about anarchism, and when I read this is what connected modern work, progressive workplaces, with the idea of anarchism for me, because she said anarchism, but I say it's what we're trying to do every day. She said it's the freest possible expression of all the latent powers of the individual, which is only possible in a state of society where man is free to choose the mode of work, the conditions of work, and the freedom to work. One to whom the making of a table, the building of a house, or the tilling of the soil is what the painting is to the artist and discovery to the scientist. The result of inspiration, of intense longing, and deep interest in work as a creative force. And best I can tell, that sums up the last 2 days, and I just deeply appreciate what y'all are doing and what you're doing, and thanks for going long.